They start off as just a load of rubbish on the studio table, bits of old plasticine, electrician's tape, coat hangers, little bits of old wire, particularly in this one, whatever's kind of kicking around that I don't need anymore or that I found interesting, or I've found a lot of it's found objects as well. The painting on my right here is made from plasticine, coat hangers, and one of those economy light bulbs. I guess they're made sort of stream of consciousness. I sit and I play for hours and hours. I sometimes make maybe 20 of these in a day, and one of them might have a little bit of something interesting about it that catches my eye. This particular group, they kind of go together, and I sort of see them all as portraits, even though they're essentially portraits of nothing, really. They're abstract, but they have elements that might suggest that you can kind of anthropomorphize them, see yourself in them somehow. I mean, there's indications of heads and eyes, and quite often I spend my time with them. They sort of gender themselves as well. I see them as male or female. I think it's because the process is so long, the painting of them takes such a long time. I become very acquainted with the image. I anthropomorphize onto it. I see it as human, and I start to kind of project some ridiculous character onto it. And obviously it's just a load of old dying, smelly, decaying plasticine in this case. But I do start to kind of ennoble them somehow. I give them a past. They have a sense of, and that's what I'm looking for, a sense of a past and a future. They're valid as entities rather than just discarded, something that's not worth looking at. This one here is called Bad VR, just because it just looked like he was away. I'm saying he. You see, I gendered that straight away. It's his eyes. They're not eyes, but they're kind of covered with these brightly coloured balls of plasticine, and the expression on the face just reminded me of those people that stand there, kind of like on VR, in a completely separate environment to the one that they're physically in. And he seems to be engaged in something, even though he's just got these little balls of brightly coloured plasticine over his face. And it just looked like a really bad, cheap VR set that he maybe ordered over the internet, and it's not quite doing the job that he thought it might. He's also, the tape that's covering what might be the head and shoulders has got a kind of shiny, latex fetishy sort of thing going on with him. I started to wonder what it was he might be looking at. Is he looking at pornography, or is it something kind of more esoteric than that? I don't know. I quite like the image, though. That's the thing that kind of made me want to paint it, is that kind of ambiguity and tension. This one here is Venus, and she has these huge boobs and no arms, and obviously that's a reference to Venus de Milo. She's sat on a bit of old clockwork and a hinge. The eyes are, what would be the eyes are the old Mickey Mouse kind of thing of when a mouse dies in an old Disney cartoon. They put like a big cross over the eyes to kind of indicate death. I wasn't thinking of a specific narrative for it when I did that. There's a brass collar around the neck with a nut and bolt through it, which is also kind of slightly fetishy as well. And I think that's a sort of a common element that a lot of these things have. They have a sense of other about them, or that they're not quite conforming. But they're essentially abstract, and I view them like that. I'm not thinking about these narratives when I sit down and paint them. I'm thinking about, how do I make that white look convincing? How is that purple going to react with that weird blue that I've put on? This last one's called Tinnitus, purely because it's got a sort of a drawing pin stuck in where the cavity that might have been an ear. And I suffer from tinnitus terribly. Like it's a daily kind of thing. I have Morse code in my head the whole time. And you could kind of extract a narrative from this painting, but then again, I just don't think it's there particularly. It's there as a joke. These things are kind of thrown in an offhand way. I think it's got its own thing going on, this painting. It reminds me very much of those beautiful old African carvings, which I look at a lot. I think those things are amazing, and have been huge influence on this group of paintings particularly. There was an exhibition that the Chapman brothers did a few years ago called the Chapman Family Collection, where they kind of modified versions of old Ronald McDonald Happy Meal toys and they carved them out on a grand scale out of wood. And that was fantastic, that exhibition. And I kind of doing a similar sort of thing on a smaller, messier, more grubby scale, I think. So that's that wall. This one's probably about 4 inches high. I don't keep them, and that's an actual spark plug from my car behind it there. So yeah, you can see the relative scale of it. It's like this, 4, 5, 6 inches tops, I would have thought. And the other thing about them is they only look good from one angle, the sculptures. I'm not a sculptor. I don't think like sculpture. I think about that one specific angle where this thing has caught my eye, where it looks to have some life about it somehow, where it's got some sort of tension. If you look around the back of it, it'll look awful. I could never display them as they are because I don't think about them in a rounded way. I think about them in the flat image. You know, that I'm about capturing that kind of thing that I saw in the corner of my eye, rather than kind of making this complete 3D entity. It's not that. They get chucked back in the bin once I've finished with them. Sometimes they stick around and I'll pull bits of them out of the big plasticine bin that I've got, and I'll pull bits out of them, and the plasticine will start to rot and it'll smell, but it's got more interesting. So they get regurgitated and put back into another sculpture somewhere along the way, and eventually they just decay and crumble and fall to pieces. But they often see several incarnations, these things. There's lots of versions of the bad VR one. It just seemed to last a long time, that sculpture, and I keep coming back to it and thinking, I still like you, I still think you're cool, and I still want to do something with you. So it'll get a big pink nose, like the big pink nose over in the corner, or it'll get its head torn off and kind of put into something else. So yeah, they sometimes have multiple lives. I wish I could have kept this one now. I didn't, I threw it away.